No offense.
Like, I'm all over the place.
I was utterly gagged. She literally stabbed him. Oh, what? Literally what? Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Is back talking about books, and I'm so excited about what we're going to talk about today. We are going to be doing a full, thorough talk, review, etc., about my thoughts on this book, Serpent and the Wings of the Night. I'm gonna put the book right here. My overall general thoughts is I should not have liked this book as much as I did. But by the end of the book, by the end and the twists and the turns and the relationships that we went through and all of the trauma and the tension and the suspense and the enemies to lovers, the games, the death, I ended up loving this book to death. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Does it actually deserve 5 out of 5 stars critically? Is it a mind-bending book? It's gonna change your life kind of 5 out of 5 stars? No. But the amount of fun that I had reading this and the amount of tense scenes and characters that I loved while reading this, I felt like the things that this book did that were really good were so good that it overshadowed the flaws of the book, because there are a lot of flaws in the book and we will get into it as I go on with this talk and this review. But yeah, I did give it a 5 out of 5 stars just because I enjoyed the book so much that the flaws were overshadowed by everything that I liked. So if you've never heard of this book, what is Serpent and the Wings of the Night about? It is a vampire and human book. It is in a fantasy world, hence the vampires, all the different elements and the different vibes you'll get. And hear me out, okay? Hear me out. It is Hunger Games meets A Court of Thorns and Roses, at least the second half of A Court of Thorns and Roses, meets Fourth Wing because of the Death Games, meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibes, the movie, because of the romance was very much giving that kind of enemies to lovers, with also elements of Tangled, Rapunzel, and Tangled. Hear me out, like the character relationships between all of them is very much like Tangled fanfiction. Every time I would read something in here, I would think, wow, this man is so much Mother Gothel vibes. Oriah, who is the main character, is so much Rapunzel vibe. Like, I'll get into it later, but those are the type of elements that I felt while reading this book. I couldn't help but make parallels to those specific medias. A Court of Thorns and Roses, Fourth Wing, Hunger Games, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and Tangled. The most wild things, but I don't know, it just made sense in my head, okay? My head is crazy. The synopsis. What is Serpent and the Wings of the Night about? It follows a human named Oriah. She is the adopted daughter of the vampire king, the most powerful person in the vampire world. Okay, there are different houses in this vampire world, and he is in charge of the most powerful house. He is ruthless, villainous. He is so powerful, and his name is Vincent. Years and years ago, when she was a little girl, he went into the human lands where she lived with her family, and Vincent destroyed everything, you know, as one does to get power. He destroyed everything and saw Oriah there. She was a tiny, fierce little thing and saw himself in her, decided to bring her back into his kingdom to live with him and live her human days out with him ever since she was a baby. And so since childhood, after losing her human family, not remembering a single person in her human family, goes to live with Vincent, who becomes her adoptive dad. We start the book off, believe it's like 15, 20 years later. Oriah is a young woman. She has learned how to battle. She is having an identity crisis about being human in a vampire world. And she also has a lot of questions about her past family and has always questioned if there's any other humans around there. She has grown up around vampires fully, and these are people who she has learned to never trust. Her dad, Vincent, the most powerful man, the most powerful vampire in the vampire kingdom, says to her, there is nobody you can ever trust except me. And she has deep-seated trust issues, okay? And we will get into the characters later and the deep-seated trust issues later. But yes, that is how we start off Oriah. Oriah feels weak. She is a human. She has deep-seated trust issues. And she is utterly devoted to Vincent, devoted to her father, because deep down she knows that her father loves her. He is not a words of affirmation man, Vincent. He is ruthless, but also so is Oriah. And so Vincent loves Oriah and sees himself in her, even though they are not technically related by blood, loves her and shows her that he loves her in different ways, in caring for her and protecting her, but never actually physically saying, Oriah, I love you. He is an acts of service man. In the beginning of this book, because of this identity crisis that Oriah goes through, because of being human in a world full of so much danger and living in fear and having to hide that fear, and her father Vincent telling her that she needs to hide the fear and be fearless and this, that, and the third, but she is only human. There is only so much she can do. She wants to become a vampire, but Vincent refuses because it's really dangerous. He decides what is the best way, best of both worlds, what she should do if she wants to find her human family. She wants to see if there's any humans out there like her and visit them, perhaps meet them, perhaps meet some blood relatives, just anything. Vincent has the great idea of entering a death game. I forget what the game is called, okay? But I'm just gonna call it the death game. This death game is basically similar to the Hunger Games, similar to Ascyath College and Fourth Wing, where a lot of people die. It is a competition where there is one victor, and this one victor would be blessed by the goddess herself. I also forget her name. This one victor, whoever wins this game, where so many people die, and it's so dangerous, this one person gets any single wish from the goddess herself. Oriah enters this death game hoping to wish to be Vincent's camaraderie. Don't know how to say it. I don't know exactly how they say it in the book, but basically I'm gonna call it camaraderie, okay? I'm making up words. And what a camaraderie is, it's like a political thing too. Oriah wants to visit the human lands, but it's impossible for her to visit because her dad Vincent doesn't have access to the human lands. So he says, you know, if you bound yourself to me, you're human, I would have access and more power to the human lands, but you would also get all of my power, so we would be linked and this, that, and the third. If you enter this death game and you win, which I believe you will, then being bound, you are able to enter the human lands, and by entering the human lands, you can go find your family. You can find your relatives, maybe, whoever might be alive, if there is anybody, and you can find out about yourself and your human life. And so that's what he tells her. That is her plans. And so the beginning of the book is her entering this death game. It is brutal, it is intense, and that is kind of how we start the story. That is the setup. If you want to read it, go ahead and read it. I will put spoilers at the end of the book. Overall thoughts on the book, I absolutely loved it. I have read so many books where there is a death game, but I eat it up every single time. This is a romance. It's a fantasy romance, so there is a very heavy plot on the romance. It's not really a big world building book, and I'll get into that on my dislikes, but I'm just talking about my likes right now. I think that the romance just ate up. It ate up so good, and I think the beginning of the book was definitely really slow, but as you got into it, as you get maybe, I think it took me around halfway through the book to really fully get invested in the story. I could not stop reading it after I got halfway through. But it took me that long to get there, okay? So I think it definitely does have a slow start, but after that, it really picks up. Other than having a kind of slow start, I'm gonna say it was perfectly paced. At least the romance part was perfectly paced. There was insane amounts of tension. It was enemies to lovers. The edge of control that all of these characters felt had so much tension. Especially there's a scene when they're starving the characters to death. They're in this room together, a human and a vampire who has bloodlust, and she is the only human in a castle full of vampires. Like, there's just so much tension there. So much stakes is in this book. And I loved the way that the characters developed. From fearing everything around her and feeling like she always has to be looking over her shoulders, to feeling the uttermost safe around a person that she should feel the most dangerous of, around the most dangerous person. I absolutely loved it. I think if you are a romance girly, this book is a romance girly book for you. That's why I love romances in a fantasy world, because the stakes are just so high. When you are reading contemporary romance, it's in modern day society. The stakes can only be so high. This is life and death. There is literal tropes where the characters have to kill each other. There's no other way around it. They literally have to, one person has to stab the other, okay? That is why I'm saying it's giving Hunger Games. Peeta and Katniss were like, we have to kill each other. By the very end, there can only be one victor, and then they both end up trying to eat the berries. There's absolutely no way that both of them can just be like, okay, why don't we just kill ourselves? Because both of them have their own motives other than the romance. Like, the romance is not the only thing that's important in this world. Like, there's just so many other things around it. I think that all of the characters, the main ones at least, were so well done that because all of the side characters were borderline non-existent and weren't really that developed at all, I didn't really care. For example, one thing I didn't like, right, was that in the very beginning of the death game, they start out, bam, Oriah goes into the castle that she is going to be living at, where the death games are being held. She has this human friend. Her name is Alana. We met her for one chapter. This is the only human companion that Oriah has had, the only human person that she has ever really talked to in a world full of vampires, and she is the only human too. Alana is her best friend. We meet her for one chapter, and then, I'm not really spoiling anything, it happens at the beginning of the book. They kill off Alana in a few chapters later, right in the very beginning of the death game. And I understand that the reason why they did this was to give more character development to Oriah, to raise the stakes of this death game, see how serious it is, put a little more trauma into Oriah, saying how dangerous, how serious, how many bad things can happen, and just add another level to the danger of the game by killing off her best human friend, her best human companion. But the thing is, as a reader, we met Alana for one chapter. So we did not care that Alana died. And here Oriah is grieving her bestie, grieving, oh my god, Alana's dead. They killed her. I'm so angry. I'm grieving. I have to hold it in because no one can know that this was my friend, that I'm grieving that I lost somebody. And in my head, I'm reading this beginning, I'm like, who is Alana? Like, I don't care about, no offense, but I don't care about Alana. I don't know her. You didn't even give me enough to know her. So I think that is kind of one of the things that I was like, okay, these side characters are not really giving me a lot. But Oriah, Ryan, who's the main love interest in it, they were such great characters. Ryan, kind of his character development, it's not really good either. I think this story mainly focuses on Oriah and her character journey. So if you are a very focused character-driven reader, then you will really like it. I think we get a little bit more about Ryan at the end of the book, but yeah, he's not really that developed either. And I do like Vincent as father figure and his kind of backstory. They have a lot of subtext there about what kind of person Vincent is, but they don't really get into it, and I kind of really liked that. Oriah has daddy issues for real, for real. Oriah has major daddy issues. Yes, Vincent loves her, but he's an abusive father. He is evil. And you could see those inklings of evil throughout the entire story. And I never trusted him from the beginning. Never, never, never. I literally saw Vincent and I was like, you are suspicious, sir. Because tell me why you want your daughter to enter a death game and do all of this, that, and the third, where she will most likely die. Okay, this is a very dangerous game. But you don't want to turn her because they're saying, oh, I can't put you at risk. It's too dangerous to turn you. I was like, that is so suspicious. Because I feel like it would be less dangerous to turn your daughter who wants to be a vampire than to enter her in a death game where it's more likely she would probably die because there's hundreds of contestants who are, like, she could have died on the first day. It's so risky. So I did not trust Vincent from the start. I knew he had ulterior motives, but I still really liked him as this sort of conflicting father figure. You love him because Oriah loves him, and Oriah having to grapple with her loving someone who is just so evil, but this is a man who loves her and she loves him and she's utterly devoted to her father, and having to grapple with all that, having to grapple with being a human in a world full of people who do not like you or hate you. And I don't think that the author was doing this on purpose, okay? I don't think that at all. But when I was reading some of the paragraphs in here, I felt like there was an allegory with being adopted, with racism, being human in a world full of blood-sucking vampires, and where everybody hates you and wants to kill you. There's so many parallels to racism. And also like different cultural things, like maybe being someone who's adopted into another culture. Like me growing up in America, but being Asian American and having to deal with a world where, you know, especially around COVID, there was a lot of people who would see that you're Asian and like microaggressively stand a little back because they're like, oh, China virus and this, that, and the third. Like, you know, there's a lot of these little things where I feel like it could be parallels to the real world. There's just so many similarities to the real world. It says, but you have a home here, little serpent. That's what Vincent calls her. A home that suits you. Maybe your blood runs red, but you belong here. He didn't understand. She did have a home here, but the life within its walls was one of constant fear. I don't, she said. Everyone wants to kill me here. The king did not argue with her. He had told her this was true many times over. And I think that little inkling of being in a world where everybody hates you and having to deal with that. There's like so many different allegories for even racism, homophobia, sexism. Like, I think the human to vampire parallel can be seen in a lot of different contexts, and I think it could be really interesting in that way. Like, if you were to really fully analyze it, the political nature of the book, of the human and vampire nature of it. Anyways, that's a long tangent about that. Do you feel like Vincent was very much, the dad was very much giving Mother Gothel vibes? I love you, Rapunzel. You are my daughter. I love you. But he has these ulterior motives that Mother Gothel had. And Rapunzel, growing up in this tower, aka the castle, and loving her father, aka her father, Mother Gothel, but wanting to escape, still wanting to see what's out there, still wanting to explore the human realms, see everything out there. Along the way, along her journey, she meets Flynn Rider, aka Ryan, in this book. To me, this is literally Tangled fanfiction. Like, that is how I read it, okay? Because of the character dynamics. I think the one issue I did find in the beginning was that we don't really know much about Ryan, who is the love interest. He's a mystery, and I think we don't really care about this world as much, and that's why I felt like the first half was slow, because the world building wasn't all the way there. Like, we didn't really get to settle into this world and care about this world and what's happening around in it. It was very much a back burner to the death game and Oria's character development that was happening. But no matter all those little flaws, like, I really believe if you are a world building reader, if you are a plot driven reader, you will not like this book, okay? This book is for the romance girlies, because as a romance book, this book ate down. It was so good as a romance, okay? The tension was there. I cannot explain in better words how the stakes in this book, how high they were, made for such a good romance and love story. And this is why I said it is very much like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, aka the movie, not the new TV show, the movie. Because in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they are rival spies, right? And towards halfway through the book, they are literally fighting each other, but it's so erotic, it is so tense, but they love each other deep down. By the end of this book, that is what you get, okay? And I think that the love story and the progression of that, from enemies to full on, literally started the book with Oriya stabbing Ryan in the thigh and running out. She literally stabbed him. That trope within itself, and starting out a romance where you literally stab him in a fantasy book, loved. First of all, number one. Two, it's enemies to forced allies, you know, like they have to ally with each other so that they could win this game. And then after a certain task that happened, after they ally for a little bit, there's a timeline to the relationship. They said, we'll be allies because we have to for this specific challenge. After that challenge is over, we can be done and we can go and kill each other. And they said, great, I hate you, let's do it. But as they become allies, as they learn more about each other, about how Ryan, who's this big, dark, brooding man, obviously. Ryan is a vampire with a human soul, and how Oriya is a human with a vampire soul, and how those two things are kind of intertwined, and them kind of slowly developing this relationship where they don't like each other, and then they're okay with each other, then they're good teammates, they work together, to, oh my god, you almost died, I realize I love you. And they love each other after, is so good. The romance in it is perfectly paced. That is what I meant by perfectly paced, because the politics and the story, it does start off slow, but the romance is perfectly paced. I devoured every single second of it. The ending had me gagged. Okay, I was utterly gagged. I was screaming. I don't really like to do video vlogs, reading vlogs, because I need to concentrate. I'm too focused on, you know, maybe filming it. And like, if I'm reading something crazy, like I don't want to turn on the camera, but this, I was like, no. My reaction to this, I was all over the place with my feelings. I think that the end, there are twists and turns. Some of them were predictable and others I should have seen coming, but honestly, I was just too in love with the story and invested that I didn't really see it coming. It gagged me, okay? And I loved it. The ending happened so quick, but I didn't care because I was so into the story, okay? And that's why I'm saying it gives Avatar vibes, because I'll explain it towards the end, and when I put up the clips of me reacting to the end, yeah, I was just utterly gagged. I absolutely loved it. I loved the twist and the turns, and by the end of the book, them literally having to kill each other, there's just so much there. There's so much tension. The character development was also perfectly paced. The gradual change from who Oriya was in the beginning to her entering this death game, figuring out who she is, what she wants, to how different she ends up being in the end, and how loving Ryan changed her, and her having major trust issues. Major, okay? Like, she has insane trust issues. Her last lover did something horrible to her because he was a vampire, and she has this love-hate relationship with vampires, and her falling for Ryan, who was the love interest in this, is just a thing that she just did not see coming, and feeling safe around a person who is designed to kill her, designed to suck the life out of her, is just the best forbidden love story, because this is a forbidden love story. It isn't enemies to lovers. It is a real, true, hardcore enemies to lovers, okay? There's no way getting around that they have to kill each other. I love it. Okay, I love it. I just can't believe that they started out as strangers and her stabbing his thigh, and by the end of the book, seeing how much they progressed and how much of the story happens, it feels like a millennium ago. It feels like a blip. How is this only 300 pages? And I feel like we have gone so far, but it feels so gradual. The change does not feel sudden in the slightest. I love that it is enemies to lovers, but by the end, yes, they are still enemies, but they don't want to be enemies anymore. They are forced to be enemies. And that creates so much tension in itself. It raises the stakes. It's amazing. I like also that there was a timeline to the relationship. The element of a timeline, I have read it in so many romance books before, but I eat it up every single time, okay? Example, it happened one summer. I believe there's a timeline that. The Kiss Quotient, there was a timeline. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, I believe there was a timeline, like they were supposed to be married for like 5 years and then it was over after that. The Life Hypothesis has the timeline. It's like the fake dating has a timeline, because it's like, oh, when they're done fake dating me at this specific time, then it's over. This book has a timeline, and I don't know why that trope in particular, when there is an end to the relationship, there's a very specific end, it just makes for such a good story because it raises the stakes. It creates more longing and creates more yearning for something that they cannot have, and yearning for something that feels so impossible. And I just love it so much. I also really love the human and vampire dynamics. I don't think that this book is God's gift to humanity. I've said that many times, but I do like the parallels that you can make between humans and vampires in danger, and at least in American society. I feel like in a lot of other cultures too, racism, sexism, homophobia, feeling that Oriya can be an insert for all these different types of things and that you might experience as hardships growing up. I just think that the tropes that were in this book were done so well that it makes up for everything that it was lacking. And it was lacking a lot in the world building. I just didn't really miss it. I didn't miss the world building. I didn't really care that we didn't have it because I liked the story and I liked the romance so much. I think, yeah, the beginning started out slow for me because we didn't get the world building and we didn't care enough about the side characters, especially at the end. Oriya is talking to this one girl out the window, and if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. The soldier girl. And I was like, who is this person? I don't remember her in the slightest because we don't see her ever since the very beginning of the book. And I don't care for that person at all. I was honestly feeling like DNFing it in the very beginning. But as I kept reading it, it just, once it picked up, okay? And I think it took me around halfway through, but it became a 5-star read for me because of the end. And even if it was predictable, I just think that everything that it did that was good, it was really good. All the faults that this book had and the dislikes that it had are all about the world and the world building and the plot. The only other flaw in this book that I really saw was the actual game itself. The game itself was boring. It wasn't memorable. Like, for example, if you read ACOTAR, there's a sort of game towards the end where she has to go through 3 trials and Amarantha is having her do these 3 trials. They're very memorable. The first one was the worm. The second one was reading. The third one was this. It's very specific, very memorable. This death game, every single game that they had, every single trial that they had was all the same. They were in an arena and people tried to kill them. Then they were in the arena, monsters tried to kill them. Then they were outside, and then they tried to kill each other. But now this time they're hungry. Like, it was the exact same copy and pasted, almost, game for every single trial that they had. In that way, there could have been room to have something a little bit more interesting happen there. All the different challenges could have done better with that, but I think that the ending and the setup for the second book, it has so much potential, and I'm a little scared because I feel like I don't make my opinions off of other reviews, but I have seen that the second book is not as liked as much as this one, and it's 600 pages, like, it's so long. I just really hope that it lives up to the potential, because this second book has so much potential for all of the little dynamics that are happening in this. And now I'm gonna get into spoiler territory, okay? I'm gonna talk about spoilers. I'm gonna talk about Ryan. I'm gonna insert my last thoughts reading the ending of this book and what I thought about it, okay? So I'm gonna insert that here. Oh my god, I never vlog when I'm reading, but I literally screamed. I cannot process this. It's literally giving Hooked. It's giving Hooked. If you know the book Hooked, this is the same shit. That is okay. Hold on. Let me process. Let me write down my note. This man, the entire book, you fall in love with him. Deadass. They're already enemies to lovers, okay? They are already enemies to lovers. Sorry, I'm filming vertically, but like, I was just, you know, like, I'm all over the place. They're literally already enemies to lovers. I am 93% of the way into this book already. I got, you know, shock after shock. And usually it's hard to shock me. I feel the twists and turns of books coming pretty easily because I read way too much. He's actually got me. I was like, oh, okay. But in this part, Ryan, you know, takes back his power and he's acting all crazy. And he says this line, okay, like, okay, the possessiveness, but like, he's so different than like what you get from the rest of the book. And it's shaking me up because this is something that Hooked in the book Hooked, this is something that he would say. I don't know if this is an act. I'm only 93% of the way through the book, okay? So there's still 7% more. But he says, I took Vincent's kingdom, I took his life, I took his title, and now I will take his daughter. Literally, I have a YouTube video planned about revenge plots against the dad's book. Hooked is in one of it. This is literally the same shit, but it's so funny. I'll make her my wife. I'll keep her close where I can keep an eye on her, and I'll make sure it hurts when I fuck her, just like it did when he our queen 200 years ago. Oh, gagged! Why is this man saying these things? I hope to God he does not mean this and he's just saying this to this guy. But it's so funny because it's literally word for word what Hooked would say in the beginning of that book about Wendy in that book, Emily McIntyre, and that book was unhinged. And why is Ryan literally like the most sweetest, like, oh my God, I love this man so much. I love this man so much. I fell in love with this man throughout this book. This enemies to lovers ass book. And he said this shit, like, even if it's fake, it sounds so believable. I can't. I'm still on the same page, okay? Think of that. Ryan's face was right next to mine as he gripped me against his body. I glimpsed his wolfish feral grin out of the corner of my eye. How much more interesting than death for her. There can be no other Hiaj heir as long as she lives. And I'd happily make her my little slave forever. Oh! Just as Vincent was happy to make the Rishon his. I cannot. Boy, the words that are coming out of your mouth right now. Bitch, you better be joking. As Maddie from Euphoria would say, bitch, you better be joking. Because even if it's a joke, she will never look at you the same. And she gave up everything for him. And right after she gave up literally everything for him. He goes and kills her dad. The daddy issues in this is insane. I need to start making more reading vlogs so I can actually process my emotions, but no words. I officially think that Sarah J. Maas has ruined reading love triangles or romance in general so differently. Like, she makes me think all the way at the end, okay, that Septimus, okay, Optimus Prime's cousin, is cloaked as a villain, but he's being so nice to her, saying, I hope you can find it in your heart to call me a friend. You may find we have more in common than you think. We're the only ones who know what it's like to fight against time. Counts for a lot in this world, doesn't it? And he was placing bets on her like Rhysand. Now, looking back on it, there's so many reflections of A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first book. Him placing bets on her is very much Rhysand vibes, but he gave me the ick in the beginning. Ryan marrying her, forcefully locking her in a room, very much tampon energy. And the entire quote that he says, you aren't my prisoner, you're my queen. Okay, tampon vibes, Tamlin vibes. I think it's ruined me, because like, what happens if I read the second book? The things that are going on in my head, like, oh my god, maybe Septimus is a love interest, like Rhysand was a love interest. Imagine that does not happen at all. But in my head, I was thinking that, and this entire book, I was rooting for Ryan. I was like on my knees for this man. I was obsessed with him. And you know, I will read a dark romance, and in a dark romance, even though he's locking her away and like killed her dad, and in any dark romance, I'm like, that's so romantic. That's so romantic. But what if this is doing a little plot twist and turn, saying that the House of Blood, who everyone villainizes, and Septimus is like a bad person, but in reality, he's love interest number 2. Imagine I'm wrong in thinking that, because I've read Sarah J. Maas and I'm like, we've been there, done that, heard this story before, but this book is just in a different font. But it'd also be really interesting to read. Like, I'd love to see that happen. But I loved writing this entire book. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm literally all over the place. So the ending and having twists and turns of her wish being, I wish that Ryan had won. Ryan waking up and immediately killing her father. What? Literally what? I understand that is what you do, but then the things that he said, I was like, boy, I know he's not serious, but by the end of this book, the marriage of convenience that could happen in book 2, oh my god. This relationship by the end, falling in love with these two characters and him looking at her. There's a scene towards the end of the book where they get together, you know, like, they make it a point in the book where every morning, vampires can't look at the sun, right? Every morning he stays and tries to watch the sunrise for as long as he can until it hurts. And then he stares at the sun and then he goes to sleep after. She notices this about Ryan and is like, this is so interesting. Why doesn't that hurt? Not as much yet. Then they fall in love, right? Oriah and Ryan fall in love. They do it. And then she says, the sun's going down. Don't you want one last look? Ryan didn't hesitate, didn't look away from me once. He answered, no, and kissed me. She's better than the sun. She is better than sunlight. It's very much giving Andrew Garfield. Emma Stone is like a shot of espresso. By the end, Oriah's trust issues through the freaking roof. Through the roof, okay? Because tell me why her dad, first of all, killed all of her family and in the entire kingdom. Trust issues there. Lied to her about everything. Secondly, felt the uttermost safe around Ryan. Felt like she could be with him, that she could trust him. And then he goes and kills her father. Trust issues to the freaking moon, okay? This girl in the book 2 is gonna have major trust issues. I don't know how she will recover. And I don't know what the second book will be like. I don't know if I can even trust Ryan anymore because of all of this. And the way that he was acting, the fake things that he was saying, like, do I love him or do I hate him anymore? I don't know, and that's why I'm so conflicted. I love, though, that book 2 is probably gonna be a marriage of convenience because they get married by the end of this book, which is crazy. But like, he will find answers, we'll do the wedding. Wedding, oh mother. I'm not marrying you, I spat. Yes, you are. Fuck you, I'm not. a muscle feathered in his cheek. It's the only way I can keep you alive. If you're not my wife, you're my enemy, and I can't justify letting you go. Marriage of Convenience! Marriage of Convenience! Book 2. I'm so excited, okay? But he really was giving me tampon vibes by the end. I'm just so interested to see how this book will continue. All this to say, is it a 5-star read? Actually, probably not. But the twists and the turns, and the characters, and the trust issues, and the Tangled vibes, the Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibes, the Aquatar vibes that I was getting in this, I loved every second by the end. By the end of this book, I was like, yep, this is good. This, I was enjoying myself. I haven't enjoyed myself reading like this in so long. I haven't screamed while reading a book in so long that I couldn't give it less than 5 out of 5 stars. Because there was nothing that irritated me. All the flaws that I said are actual true flaws that are in the book, but none of it irritated me. And the reason why I give half points off or full points off to books when I rate them is when things irritate me. For example, I utterly loved Emily Henry's Book Lovers, okay? But I did give it a 4.95 out of 5 for the pure fact that throughout the book, the little sister called the main character Sissy, and I hated that, and it irked me to my core, and it brought me out of the book that I couldn't not mark it because it irritated me. But nothing about the faults of this book irritated me. I was confused at times, but I think the confusion wasn't irritating. So yeah, 5 out of 5-star read, and I was never bored, and I was having a great time. Please, 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 please let me know your thoughts down below about what you thought of this book. If you've read it, if you haven't read it, go read it and then let me know. It was a crazy time. This makes me want to do reading vlogs, okay? Screaming and crying and throwing up because that is what was happening in this book, okay? So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please, please subscribe. I will love you so much. It costs nothing. And also when you click that subscribe button, it literally glitters. Like I just realized that the other day when I subscribed to another YouTuber, I clicked it and it started glittering. So if you want to see a little shine happen, please, please subscribe. I love you guys so much. And like the video if you liked this video. Thank you so much for watching and I will catch you in the next one.